This is Technically Legal, a podcast about legal technology, innovation in the legal industry, and the impact tech is having on the law. On today's show, I'm in conversation with Amanda Tuminelli. She's the Chief Legal Officer for the DeFi Education Fund. On a recent post on a LinkedIn page, today's guest, Amanda Tuminelli, highlighted an update from a fellow crypto lawyer who said he was a coder and a lawyer and pursued a legal career in crypto because he believes that most legal issues are also technical issues. That was a fitting repost for Amanda because she currently holds the position of Chief Legal Officer for the DeFi Education Fund. DeFi is shorthand for decentralized finance, and the backbone of DeFi is blockchain technology and smart contracts. And what's a smart contract? It's often literally legal and technology converging. The DeFi Education Fund describes itself as a nonpartisan research and advocacy group that works to explain the benefits of DeFi to help achieve regulatory clarity on crypto issues. It also helps to realize the transformative potential of DeFi generally for everybody. The DeFi Education Fund has a few areas of focus that Amanda is going to fill us in about. One is the aforementioned research and advocacy. They also work on Policymaker Education. They provide help with messaging for crypto companies. They provide research about blockchain issues and regulations. We'll also hear they provide what they call legal firepower to crypto causes. And finally, they offer advice on DeFi project best practices. Another thing Amanda and I talk about is how lawyers can now pursue a career in crypto and how that wasn't the case just a few years ago. It's not only an option now because the industry is more mature, but also because the openness of those people working in crypto and their desire to bring more passionate individuals in to join them. For anybody out there listening that wants to get a job in crypto law, Amanda emphasizes the importance of understanding the tech itself and finding projects that interest you. So, how did Amanda end up becoming the Chief Legal Officer for the DeFi Education Fund? She started out as a securities and white-collar crime lawyer and had a case come along that would change the trajectory of her career. She was working for Kobre & Kim, which is a law firm that focuses solely on disputes and investigations, when the firm was hired by a client who ended up in jail and was accused of running an illegal crypto mining scheme. To get up to speed on the case and get her client out of jail, Amanda had to do a deep dive into learning about blockchain tech, and that's when she caught the bug. A few years later, a friend and former college classmate contacted her about joining the legal team of the DeFi Education Fund, and she took him up on it. But before all of this, she served as a judicial clerk. But interestingly, she took the clerkship not right out of law school like many do, but after she'd already worked at a law firm for 5 years.
It's actually a little unique in that I clerked after 5 years in private practice. Most people clerk really early on, right out of law school or a couple years out. But I thought that would be a really important experience to have if I was going to continue to be a litigator. And so I applied to judges in the Eastern District and Southern District in New York because I wanted to stay put in Manhattan. And I ended up with Judge Donnelly in the Eastern District, and it was one of the best years of my career.
Did you have any reluctance with the judges you interviewed with that you had been practicing for so long, knowing that normally it's people do it after a year or two after law school?
I think it probably didn't come up for me because a judge wouldn't have given me an interview if they were looking for somebody who was more on the law school side. My judge actually only takes people with at least 1 or 2 years of real life experience working. So I think she self-selects for that and believes that you're only a better clerk because you've seen the motion practice and you've lived through it in practice. So I thought it really helped. And I always tell people now, I think that clerking after working is actually a really valuable way to go into a clerkship.
Probably is, right, because you have practical experience. You've been on the other side of the bench there, so you know what a lawyer thinks. I know you bring some unique experience to it if you've practiced for a while versus just coming out of the Ivory Tower Law School, right?
Exactly. You know why a motion to dismiss actually matters. You know kind of what's supposed to happen as motion practice continues or discovery's going on. You can understand both where the litigators are coming from, where the parties are coming from, and also what matters to the judge because you've done it, at least a few times by the time you've gotten there.
And then after the courtship, you go back to the private practice to Kobre & Kim. You do similar work, I think white collar stuff. But then is that the point you started to get in the crypto world and start representing those kinds of clients?
Yes, exactly. So I was put on a criminal case at Kobre & Kim where the allegations were that our client ran an illegal Ponzi scheme, mining scheme, and he was accused of running a Bitcoin mining operation in which, according to the government, he offered cloud mining services and did not actually pay out the amount of money that he took in. And I just completely fell down the rabbit hole because the very first thing that we had to do for this client was get him out on bail, right? To get him out on pretrial release. The standard for bail is actually that you are presumed to be released. The presumption is in favor of releasing a person before trial unless they're a flight risk or a danger to society. He obviously wasn't a danger to society, but the government argued that he was a flight risk because of his crypto. They basically said that because he had, according to them, untold wealth in places that the government couldn't find, he was a flight risk and should not be released. And it just struck me as so unfair. And unfairness is why I even went to law school. Like, injustice and unfairness, that's like what motivates me the most. So we tried 3 times and we got him out on the 3rd time. But in order to get him out, we had to do multiple presentations to the court showing, like, proving a negative, proving that there was no additional money out there that the court didn't know about. And that flips the burden on its head. It's not supposed to be the defendant's burden to disprove what the government is saying about their finances. So it was, I think, the entry point to me understanding that this is a whole new world. Crypto is a whole new world. And if prosecutors and judges don't understand the subject matter that they're dealing with, it leads to some bad decisions. And like I said, luckily we did get him out ultimately. And then I ended up taking many more clients in the crypto and blockchain space because once I understood it, the firm recognized that as a valuable addition to the team. And I also really loved it. So I looked for the opportunities to work more on that.
How'd you carry the day to get the client out on bail? Did you have to show the judge his Bitcoin wallets, his addresses, and showing him what was there and what wasn't there? Or how'd you get him out ultimately? What swayed it?
We did a full forensic financial analysis, which is not normal. You don't normally have to do that pre-trial. And remember, he's in jail while this is happening, right? So it's not even like he has free access to all of the resources he would if he were out. So we had to piece together a full financial picture, which did include wallet addresses. It included some of like the things that would be at issue in a trial where we were showing all this money spent on mining equipment was on chain. Purchases were made on chain, and we could show this is where the money went and this is what was mined. And the government doesn't understand that money that is mined does not mean that he just like sat on all that money and did nothing with it. If it's mined and paid out and that's on chain, you can see that. So we did a full flow chart essentially of the money in and the money out and showed that there was no unaccounted for money anywhere. And also this idea that he was going to do this like James Bond escape route from his home that he shared with his wife and 3 children and had lived in for like 2 decades was ridiculous. So there were also some additional like softer factors that weighed in favor of him not being a flight risk, but we did have to do that full financial breakdown.
But prior to this, you weren't into crypto. That pushed you to do the research to figure out what crypto and blockchain technology really was.
Yeah, exactly. I'd heard of it and, maybe had done some very casual reading about what it was, but I really didn't understand how it worked or really what it was or the possibilities of how great, blockchain can be. So I learned about it in order to represent this client well. And then also we took more clients in the space who had other issues that were not necessarily criminal, that were civil enforcement actions or responding to subpoenas or investigations. And that allowed me to learn different digital asset platforms, different projects. And I really, really liked it. And then the opportunity to work at DeFi Education Fund came out of nowhere. And I was like, wow, this is not expected in the best way. And that's how I ended up at DEF.
I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how you get there in just a second, because now it really makes sense. You start getting other crypto-related clients. Go back 5 years ago, and crypto warriors, there were a few out there, but it wasn't necessarily a career path. But fast forward to today, it could be a career path, right? You could actually be a crypto warrior and sustain a full practice.
100%. And I say this with all of the respect in the world for the OG crypto lawyers out there who have been doing this for 10 years, right? Like not even just 5 years. But they were really brave, right? They were really brave to do a full hard left into an industry that some people like didn't believe existed, right? Like they didn't believe was a thing. And, we are lucky enough to work with those people still. But I think you're highlighting an important point, which is that in the past 5 years, it has become much more mainstream accepted, I'll say, to go into crypto and make a real career out of it. And that should be the case, right? It is an asset class that still, like all of the skills that people have developed in becoming regulatory lawyers or in becoming civil enforcement lawyers, all of those skills matter as long as you also put the time in to learn the tech. And I think that's what has become clearer and clearer over time, is that there is a viable path to doing that.
And it's important. We need these lawyers. I mean, we need the OGs, of course, because they have that institutional knowledge, but it's only going to get bigger. And what we'll see is that pretty much any law out there could be applicable to the crypto space in some way, and the blockchain space in some way. To that point, if you're at a party and you tell somebody, some younger, maybe somebody in law school or attorney just out of law school, and they tell you, hey, I want to get in this crypto world, I want to do blockchain related law, what would you tell them?
So I would tell them, I'd ask them how much they already know about the tech, and if they weren't already steeped in learning and understanding the technology, I would tell them that they have to do that first, because I think any project or group that interviews you to work with them is going to want to feel that you are on all fours with the tech at issue. And you don't need to be like coding level, but you need to understand what's going on. You need to understand why that project or protocol is different and how it works and how it's different from traditional finance, right? But I think once you have an understanding of the tech, I would say find the projects that interest you and apply to them. A lot of the best parts of crypto are people who want to build and want to innovate and want to do that with people who are passionate about the same things as them. I have found crypto as an industry to be extremely welcoming, especially to younger lawyers. I think that the traditional finance-related law is actually somewhat opaque. I think it is really difficult to become, a super successful, well-known white-collar criminal defense lawyer or white-collar securities litigator, because there already is such a saturation in that market, and it's all, generations that have been around much longer and have seen a lot and are right to be in those places. But usually it's a former prosecutor, it's a former enforcement lawyer, it's somebody who has kind of government experience and then came back to private practice. Those are like the big names. But in crypto, I actually think you don't need any of that, and it sometimes isn't even wanted, right? I think there are people in crypto who would never hire a former prosecutor or a former SEC enforcement lawyer. But I think that works to your benefit as a young lawyer. It means the doors are open for you. People want to work with anyone of any background who's interested and passionate in the tech. That has been my experience.
Yeah, I agree. You go to these crypto conferences, and they're open. You can literally talk to anybody walking on the conference floor. But you go to the legal conference, it is different. It's a little more, as you reserved and not standoffish isn't the right word, but not as approachable. Like, it's, I definitely agree that it is more welcoming, and I'm glad you point that out. So let's talk about that. The DeFi Education Fund. You're at the same party. Someone else starts talking to somebody different. They ask you, what is it? What are you telling them? What's the elevator pitch?
So we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit advocacy group. We fight for the rights of developers and users of DeFi, decentralized finance. We fight for smart policy on DeFi, and we educate lawmakers and judges in order to make sure that smart rules are being applied to DeFi. So that's what we're all about. We are very active now in litigation. We have always been very active with educating members of Congress, and we will keep doing that. And, if there's a rulemaking by a regulatory agency, we'll comment on it. We'll consider whether there needs to be a lawsuit about it. But we're all about protecting the right for DeFi users and developers to keep building.
How did you fall into the role? How did you get contacted? Hearing your story now seems you're perfectly suited for it.
Well, thank you. I was very lucky to end up where I am. I was at Cobre and Kim making the run for partner, hoping that was what was next for me. And I got a call from a friend of mine, Jake Chervinsky. We had been friends since college. We both did mock trial together. We were both big nerds. And he's on the board of DEF. And he let me know that DEF was looking for a chief legal officer. And at first I was like, I don't know. I've been in private practice doing this a long time. He's like, just meet the people working at DEF, meet the rest of the board. You're going to love it. And he was totally right. I met everybody involved. I thought these are great people to work with. And what a unique time to be able to get into the industry. I joined in March of 2023. I think my first day was like the day after SVB went.
Yeah, I remember that day. We banked with SVP. I remember that day. Yeah.
And we, like the very first task was like, okay, we need to make sure we have bank accounts so we can still operate. But no, it was an interesting time because, as I'm sure everybody here is aware, there's been a lot of developments in the regulatory landscape, proposed legislation, proposed rules. And of course, the SEC has been ramping up their enforcement actions over the past 2 years. So I felt like it was the exact right time to get involved. And for me, it was like, okay, it's now or it's never, right? If I'm going to make this leap, I should do it before all the rules are put into place and see if I can help make a difference and help make sure that there's smart policy in place for years to come.
When we come back in a little bit, Amanda tells us how the DeFi Education Fund works with lawmakers to get them up to speed on crypto issues, how it also helps out crypto companies with legal support, and why education generally is important to the blockchain industry. I'm Chad Main, and you're listening to Technically.
We need to do more with less. That is the key takeaway nowadays from almost every survey of in-house counsel. But what if it didn't have to be that way? What if you actually could do more for less? By combining legal expertise and technology, Percipient enables legal teams to get more work done for less. Buried in contracts and sales is frustrated with turnaround time? We can help with that. Did you just get hit with a subpoena and reviewing 100,000 documents and files will tax your resources or cost you a small fortune in billable hours? We can help there too. Our team of legal professionals leverage tech and project management principles with the right amount of human oversight to deliver precise, efficient, and cost-effective legal solutions. Whether it's legal operations and contract management support, subpoena compliance, or document review, Percipient is your partner in really doing more for less. Percipient. Legal services powered by technology.
Legal. Policymaker Education. What and how do you, at the organization, impact that? What do you do? How do you impact it? What are the goals?
So some of it is very direct in that we will meet with members of Congress and their staff and educate staff about how the technology actually works. We might come in and talk about a proposed bill and why the actual language in that bill either does or doesn't reflect the reality of the technology and why it can or cannot work with the reality of the technology. We might also comment on rulemaking. So like, let's say the SEC, as they did last year, put out a proposed amendment to the ATS rule, which redefines an exchange and would really greatly affect DeFi with the way that they have proposed to amend the rule. We made sure members of Congress understood what that rule would actually do if it was finalized in the way the SEC, in the form the SEC proposed. And we also wrote several comment letters because they reopened that a couple different times. But we wrote comment letters, and if it turns out they finalize the rule, we are prepared to bring a lawsuit to make sure that the rule is challenged if it is finalized in a form that is bad for DeFi.
And I think you described that type of lawsuit, that type of litigation as impact litigation, right?
So I would call something different impact litigation, although it does in fact make an impact. But I would say impact litigation is more about picking the issue that you need to create clarity in the law on and bringing a lawsuit that like inches toward creating that better rule or better law that you're looking for. It would be a challenge to a final rule.
The whole thing. It's ahead of time. You're doing the whole thing, not just one distinct part of it.
Exactly. Yes. So when you're challenging a final rule, it's kind of within the confines of that. It's a very procedural, contained kind of challenge. It's really about analyzing the language of the proposed rule and whether it violates the Administrative Procedures Act. So it's kind of like a narrower review. But when you're thinking about impact litigation generally, so I can give you a couple of examples, like our case with our co-plaintiff Beba. In that case, Beba did a free airdrop of Beba tokens. We are asking the court to find that the Beba tokens are not securities and also that the free airdrop was not a securities transaction. And in addition, we're also challenging the APA's regulation by enforcement pattern under the Administrative Procedures Act. So that's a case that I would consider impact litigation because the potential of a huge impact on the industry is there. If we could get what we're asking for from the court, that would be really positive for the industry. It would be a clear rule that people could follow, clear guidance that people could follow, and if they wanted to do a free airdrop of tokens.
So I want to go back to Another question about policymaker education, although I want to jump ahead. One of the things you do is research. I assume some of this stuff overlaps. Who's doing the research? Is it different from the research to educate the policymakers? Was there overlap, like I would expect there would be?
Yeah, total overlap. I think that we marshal our resources in the most efficient way we possibly can. So if we see, for example, this rise in DOJ being interested in money service businesses, we make sure our policy analysts and our policy interns are live to that issue and are looking into like, what does it mean to be a money services business if you're a digital asset service provider in some way, if you're a digital asset protocol. We have great interns, we have great full-time policy analysts, and they'll look at the issue, they'll help us understand whether DeFi is there, like is the actual central issue, whether we can do something about it, whether we have like a good solution that we can propose to a regulator, or if it's the DOJ, like if there's a way we can get involved in the case to educate the court about it. So I think you're right that it overlaps, because once you look at the issue and understand it, it really does pervade all of our work. Like we can talk to a member of Congress about it. There are often members of Congress who are interested in ongoing litigation or what a court is doing or saying or what a regulator is doing or saying. So there really is a lot of overlap.
I assume you write a lot of amicus briefs too. I think I saw you have a couple out there, right?
Yes, we write a lot of amicus briefs. We try to put amicus briefs into any case that touches on DeFi, whether it be civil or criminal. We are often writing to educate the court about the technology, but also to protect developers' rights. It's very important to us to show up when we believe that a developer is being accused of something that they shouldn't be accused of. So we try to put amicus briefs into all of the major digital asset litigation that you've heard of.
And are you involved in that writing, or is it internal, other people on the team? Do you have law firms outside helping you? Who are all the cooks in this kitchen?
All of the above, lots of cooks in the kitchen. It depends on the case. So, for example, the amicus brief we put into the Coinbase case, we specifically focused on the SEC's allegations that Coinbase acted as a broker through its wallet application and through its staking service. And we hired Cravath. We worked with their team. They were absolutely amazing at helping us write that. And we are very involved internally in the writing, and we also welcome our outside counsel's feedback. But for example, in the Tornado Cash criminal case, I wrote that with Jake, one of our board members, totally in-house, didn't hire outside counsel for that one. So it's really just an analysis of where our resources are best used. You know, with my background, I feel comfortable writing in a criminal case because that's where I spent a lot of my time before this role. And whether I think we really need to get outside counsel involved if we don't have the resources internally.
Are there opportunities for lawyers who are interested in the cause to get involved in the organization? And if so, like, what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. We would welcome that. If there are people who have good ideas or if they want to write on something together, we welcome that. We do longer blog posts or get pieces published in the media that are longer thought pieces, and we're happy to co-author with people. So we've had lawyers reach out to us in the past and say, like, hey, we'd really like to help with this comment letter, or we have this great idea for a longer blog post. And we love that. We definitely don't turn people away with good ideas.
That's great. So back to the kind of the 5 things there's more than 5, but the things you're doing, one of which is messaging. What do you see working there? How are you trying to get the message out about DeFi, about blockchain, about crypto?
So it really depends who your audience is. So I think that messaging that works for members of Congress may be different from messaging that works when you're trying to reach the community. So we try to keep in mind who we're talking to, but we always want to make sure that our messaging is really clear. We try to do our best to break down the technology in a way that anybody can understand. And I don't mean that in a patronizing way. I mean that in a way that can appeal to everybody from every level of education on DeFi. This stuff is complicated. Like, even after studying it for a couple years, it's still difficult to understand new protocols sometimes that, you know, do something different than what you've seen in the past. So we try to make it really accessible for everyone. Obviously, it is a different way of talking about the tech when we're in front of a member of Congress who's focused on a specific issue. We try to address the issue that's at hand and try to be as receptive as we can to all different people.
Is the messaging different for a regulator versus a congressperson? Because Congress people by nature, or by the nature of their role, are more parochial, right? they have a different constituency. So how do you distinguish the messaging there?
I think it can be different. With regulators, unfortunately, it can feel like they just don't think the industry should exist. So you're like immediately on the defense. But we've had good conversations with regulators. We have had better conversations with members of Congress. There are some members of Congress who are really, really trying very hard to understand the tech and be fair to the industry and make sure that there's smart policy for the industry. So it's very easy to talk to those members of Congress because they already have some background and interest. But we try to approach members of Congress with no background all the time. Like, we are currently trying to plan an event for new staff, new members who have never dealt with the technology before. And in that case, we can do like a demo where we show them this is what a DeFi transaction is, kind of demystify it, and show them like it's much more simple than you're thinking, right? I think there's like people think it's opaque and it's kind of hard to understand at any level, but we try to break it down and make sure that they understand it. But yeah, it can be different depending on who you're talking to, for sure.
I want to go back to something you said, which I agree, and I have my personal thoughts about why this is, but I'm going to ask you, and I'm not going to give you mine because I'm very cynical, but you just said something I agree with, that some regulators don't want the industry to exist. Why is that? Where is that coming from? Why is there such a deep-seated antipathy to the technology?
I could be pretty cynical of this answer too.
Give me the non-cynical, because I think everybody knows the cynical one, but based on your experience, what you've seen, maybe something surprised you, like, oh, they're coming from that angle.
I think, giving the most benefit of the doubt I possibly can, I would say that new and complicated technology is daunting, and people are much more comfortable trying to think in terms that they already know and understand. And I think that some regulators look at crypto and they're like, I just want this to work like finance, right? Our whole regulatory system and framework is built on the existence of intermediaries in financial transactions. So I think when you present a new idea where there are no intermediaries, regulators are like, well, then who are we going to control? Who are we going to apply these rules to? I don't know how to answer that question. So therefore, like, I don't want to deal with this. I think it could be that simple. I really don't know. But I think that's the fairest answer, is like, new tech is hard. It doesn't fit into the existing rules. And therefore, they don't want to create new rules because that would be even harder to do.
Right. And there's some matter of irrelevancy too, like to the extent the old guard, the intermediaries aren't needed, a lot of this regulation maybe kind of.
Yeah. And for a long time, the industry was painted with this broad brush of just all of us being criminals and fraudsters, right? It was this like complete just assumption that so many people made. And I think that it was very hard to overcome that. I'd like to believe we're past that now. We're well past all of the, FTX related stuff. And I think we've had some really positive signs from Congress over the past couple quarters. And we have our first legislation that passed out of committee. We have a market structure bill that passed out of the House with a supermajority. There are positive signs here about the industry being taken seriously and having the credibility it deserves. But for a really long time, we did not enjoy that level of credibility.
To that point, going back to where everybody thinks it's bad guys and using it to buy drugs and weapons, my personal opinion, I'll hear if you agree, in no small part, I think, comes from the media and how it's presented in the media. So how's the DeFi Ed Fund approaching and educating journalists about it so the messaging isn't so bad?
I 100% agree with you that it is in part because of the media, because news, sensationalized news, is usually when bad things happen, right? It's not journalists reaching out because something great happened. Sometimes it is, to be fair. Sometimes good things do get a lot of media attention. But I think the salacious, sensationalized news of, this protocol collapsing or this project defrauding people just makes headlines. And that's where a lot of the focus was. You are not going to hear me give a quote to a journalist about some massive fraud. I will not comment on it. And I will not lend my voice to sensationalizing another instance of wrongdoing. I wouldn't have done that for TradFi either, but I just think it's not interesting to me. Any kind of fraud, which by the way exists, as we know, much more in bigger quantities in TradFi than it does in crypto, the DeFi Education Fund is not going to lend its voice to sensationalizing wrongdoing. We, of course, are realistic, and we're not going to completely ignore the fact that there's some amount of fraud and sanctions violations and things like that, and we try to be very realistic about that and make sure that we're taking that into account when we speak to lawmakers, because we have to be conscious of that, and we don't support criminal activity or sanctions violations, but we're not going to add our voices to sensationalizing the industry.
Agreed. Yeah, it's happened. There's still fraud out there. It's human nature. But again, cash is used in more criminal activity than crypto. But I was even approached it from a more innocuous level. Like, you read an article and Bitcoin's mentioned in some context, and then the next sentence is, well, it's an energy sucker, which has nothing to do with the article itself. That's I'm talking about that level where there's this, I don't know if it's agenda or lack of education. Like, how do we counteract that? Where how it's presented in supposedly unbiased stories about maybe not even about crypto.
You're absolutely right. That does happen. I think that there is, even in some of the best articles, there's like those pot shots that keep taken that seem totally irrelevant to the actual subject matter of the article. We do our best in working with members of the media who don't do that. I think there's really honest, great members of the media who want to report in an honest way. We have a great comms team that works with us and makes sure that we're responding to publications that treats crypto fairly when they're reporting. And we will often speak off the record with media to help them understand what they're reporting on. So we're happy to speak to a journalist totally off the record, never to be quoted or mentioned, just to explain, like, this is what this protocol is. This is what these allegations say. Here's where it's right or wrong, without, any benefit for us, because we see that good, honest reporting helps the industry regardless of whether we, get any credit for it.
So on your website, I think you've already touched upon this. One of the things that the organization provides as described on the website is legal firepower. Is that the situation you were talking about before where you filed a lawsuit, the BEBA tokens?
Yeah, that's one example of it. We mean that we are filing amicus briefs. We are working on impact litigation. If there are people out there who want to either challenge a regulator or file their own lawsuit, we're happy to help them put the pieces together, direct them to the right lawyers for that. We really just view ourselves as a resource to the community in whatever way we can. So that could look like an amicus brief or a comment letter or a lawsuit.
Speaking of legal firepower, I think you're also challenging something patent-related within the patent office too, right?
Yes, that's right. So True Return Systems is a company that owns a patent for technology that is like Oracle technology. And they are suing Compound Protocol in one lawsuit and MakerDAO in another lawsuit, accusing Compound Protocol and MakerDAO of essentially stealing their technology or using that technology without a license from the patent. And we don't believe that patent is valid. We believe this technology existed long before TRS supposedly patented it or invented it, according to them. And we think the records are there on GitHub showing that plenty of developers had worked on this before TRS got their patent. So we're challenging the patent at the patent board. We hired outside counsel, patent specialists, to petition the patent board to invalidate the patent. So we filed our petition, and now we are just in the heart of it, waiting for the patent board to make a decision.
So the last thing that I noticed on your website, education that you're offering, is DeFi best practices at a real high level, because I know this could get probably pretty granular. What are those? Are there certain tenets? Like, what are you suggesting to developers or just people in the industry that are DeFi best practices?
Yeah, so as you said, like, keeping it high level, we understand that every DeFi project is unique and has unique challenges. And also most projects are somewhere on a spectrum of decentralization, right? So they might still be expanding or growing whatever their ecosystem is. So we don't provide legal advice to startups, but we will direct startups or projects to the right lawyers. We'll help them understand what the regulatory and legal landscape looks like. So, for example, we do these DeFi policy boot camps with Polygon, where we will educate founders and developers about the policy makers and lawmakers in their own home jurisdiction. So if they're based in the United States, we'll direct them, like, here's your representative, here's what they've said about crypto. If you want to go talk to them, we'll go with you, right? We'll be the warm, friendly introduction between a developer and their representative, and make sure that I think it's very important for representatives to understand that voters in their jurisdictions are in crypto and are these tangible, good people who are building. I think that's really valuable. So we try to be like the go-between there. If I'm talking to somebody who's building, I'm pointing them to regulatory and compliance considerations as much as I can. I think that it's not necessarily what you want to spend your money on when you're a young startup is hiring a full-time lawyer, but there's fractional GCs now. There's like outside counsel that can serve as GCs. I think getting a lawyer involved early on is actually really important, especially if you want to be building in the United States as these things are changing and shifting. So we try to be helpful in whatever a project needs, or if they just want to provide feedback to us about how a law or a rule affects them, then we can incorporate their feedback when we respond to regulators or lawmakers.
Amanda, appreciate your time. If people want to get a hold of you or learn more about the DeFi Education Fund, where do you want to send them?
So our website has all of our resources and the briefs we filed, the comment letters we filed. We're on Twitter, we're on Discord. You can write to us. We will respond to DMs and emails. Please don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay, that's a wrap for today's episode. As always, we really appreciate you listening. If you want to subscribe, you can find us on most major podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, etc. Also, if you like us enough, I hope you leave us a favorable review. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, this has been Technically Legal.